We got a great conversation here that is going to really build on everything you've heard today. A lot of interesting conversations, some affirming to what you're doing as a brand and as a marketer, some provocative, thinking about things a little bit differently. When we think about this panel in particular, in this conversation in particular, what's exciting to me is the role that the consumers play in this. So I'm going to let Josh introduce himself here in a second, but wanted to talk a little bit first about a conversation we had prior to this conversation and our prep work for this. And when we think about the actual title of this panel and direct-to-consumer, we're not talking about direct-to-consumer products that are disrupting retail and eyewear and shoe wear and beauty and the like. We're talking about the literal direct-to-consumer and what that means when consumers have that unprecedented access to you. And when we were prepping for this conversation, something I thought was really interesting, and I went back to figure out what point in my life was I exposed to Auntie Anne's as a brand, and it was my childhood, and it was something that you went to the mall, and you went, and it was where, the mall is where teens congregated. It's where older people were power walking when it was rainy and still dark at 6 a.m. It's where you were there for stores, and there was a lot of stores happening there. And you start to think about Auntie Anne's and Cinnabon, and those are really those spontaneous snacking occasions, and where the brand from a farmer's market up into where the location will go, where your consumers are. And I promised myself at some point in my career when I got old enough to say, when I was a kid, do you remember malls? I wouldn't do that. But here I am thinking about malls and thinking about what they represent today. And you think about that being one of the first ways that we thought about what consumers are telling us and what they're indirectly telling us, where their habits are shifting, where their buying behaviors are shifting, what's happening in real estate. When you fast forward to today, you talk about data, and they're literally telling you things, whether they are IMing you and you're slipping into your DMs, or they're emailing you, or they're calling you, or they're signing up for your loyalty apps and letting you know exactly where they are and when they are. It's really what we're going to spend most of our time today talking about, which is evolving, knowing now that Auntie Anne's has evolved in the downsizing of malls and downsizing of those locations, that it represents less than half of the stores today in a thriving brand that is over 1,500 locations globally.
Globally, yes.
Yes.
About 1,300 in the U.S.
Yeah, so it's amazing to think about a brand that you may have indirectly associated with venues that don't exist as freely as they do today, and what that evolution looks like. And we're in the middle of another evolution, and what that evolution looks like from a consumer standpoint, and what those consumers are telling us. So, Josh, welcome, and thank you. I would like you to introduce yourself, tell a little bit about your role, and maybe start off with how you define CRM within your organization.
Great. Thanks, Erin. Afternoon, everybody. I'm Josh Krauss. Thanks so much for having me on the panel. The coveted 2 in the afternoon time slot. Hopefully everybody's getting a little bit of caffeine and staying awake. So I've been with Auntie Anne's for going on a year now. It's a fascinating company in a really interesting category. Everything that you just said about the evolution and the change. Does everybody know there really is someone named Anne? Auntie Anne is a real person. She's no longer associated with the company, but she started the whole thing in a farmer's market 31 years ago. And here we are 31 years later. There's locations in malls and airports. We have food trucks. We have locations in 48 other countries. And the way people think about snacks and the access that people have to food, it changes constantly. So one of our biggest areas of focus is addressing our number one barrier, which is accessibility to our stores. It is something that I'm sure most people in the category are thinking about, and thinking about what that means in terms of where people physically are, and second, how people are buying things today. So if we were having this conversation, if this panel was taking place a year ago and somebody brought up DoorDash, Grubhub, Seamless, any of the third-party delivery companies, and they said, how important is this to you? What do you think the future of third-party delivery is relative to Auntie Anne's business? I would have looked at you and I would have said, Erin, that doesn't make any sense. That's not going to happen. Nobody's going to spend $8 for delivery, including tip, or maybe even more than that, including tip, to get some pretzels and lemonade. And here, flash forward to today, and I'm here to tell you, my crystal ball doesn't work that well, but I very much think that in 3 years, that's going to be a significant part of our business. And off-premise, as we call it in total, is a huge area of focus and growth. So all that comes around to, so what is CRM? And to me, I just think of CRM as how can we use some form of data, some sort of information to get more people to our stores more frequently. Now, our panel is using the word loyalty prominently in the headline and the new customer relationship. I am a believer that the loyalty paradigm has inverted, and brands now need to be loyal to their guests, to consumers. That the true idea of an individual being loyal to a brand is the rare exception today. And CRM gives us the opportunity to show our loyalty to our customers. And the construct that I always use for that is relevance, authenticity, reach, and engagement. So it's how we're using that data point, whatever it is, to make sure that we are being as relevant as possible and authentic to our brand while reaching as many people. Does it scale? Does the program scale? And now we know, do they care about it? Are we activating them? Are we triggering sales? Because ultimately, that's what it's all about. I know there's probably a couple of you in the room who I've had conversations with from a business perspective in the past. And if you've had one conversation with me, you've heard me say, when the question immediately comes up, so what are we trying to accomplish, Josh? What's the objective? And it's always a very simple, straightforward answer. We're just trying to sell more pretzels and lemonade. And sometimes we're trying to do that by having more people come to our counters, and sometimes we're trying to do that by saying, I had no idea that you could get 3 buckets of Auntie Anne's pretzel nuggets delivered to your home or your office and have a really fun March Madness watch party because you never thought of it before. So how to tap into the right person who is already receptive to the brand and give them the knowledge and the power to understand that there are other ways to consume us, addressing our accessibility issue. So
I think it. The quote that Josh had, and when we were talking earlier, had the same quote that at best it's worth posterizing, and if not a tweet of something that's really powerful in driving how we're connecting with consumers, which was less about loyal to brands and more about brands being loyal to people. Can you talk a little bit about the greens fees? What does that mean from what consumers expect, what they've told you or told you not to do? Is it loyalty cards? Is it online ordering? Is it the delivery? What has that done for you in terms of what they expect?
Yeah, it's something that we're learning more and more about all the time. So we recently relaunched our loyalty. We have a loyalty app. We recently relaunched it, and the old app didn't give us all the data and information that we wanted. So one of the key pieces that we knew we needed from the new app was just better data overall, and that means both an understanding of who the individuals were who had the app on their phone, what their use of the app was, and then ultimately what products they were buying. So here's what we do know is we've got 3 tiers of consumers that are wildly different in terms of their frequency of visiting the stores. And, the vast majority, it's not quite the 80-20, but the vast majority of people, they're casual guests. They come 3, 4, maybe 5 times a year. And then you flip that to the heaviest consumers, and they come almost once a week. So it gives us something to key into right away to be able to say, okay, we need to understand more about our best guests. Who are they? Spoiler alert, they work at the venues where we have stores, and they see us all the time, and they come by and they buy a pretzel, and then 2 days later they come back and they get a lemonade, and the cycle repeats itself. And as an overall, it gives us the ability to better understand what the true experience is and how we can drive increased frequency, how we can impact purchase behavior overall, purchase mix, product mix, et cetera. That's how we're using it.
Let's stay on the data topic for a little bit longer. When you talk about your own app, it's your data. You can get that purchasing information. You know who that consumer was. You can start connecting those dots to know lifetime value of a venue employee. Is there something different you offer them? What about some of those things like online ordering or online delivery that were maybe a barrier for you understanding those consumers, and what role third-party data or trying to connect the dots across a lot of different places?
Yeah, it's a great point and a big value that the app gives us. It's the one true place where we can connect purchase behavior to an individual. So that's something it's incredibly meaningful to us, and it's something that we can use both in the app and crafting specific messaging to segments through the app, and also pulling that forward and using that for targeting an email, messaging an email, and understanding how that can impact our messages across the board. So definitely is a key driver. In the past, there's lots of third-party sources that we can tap into, and they give us broad insights that are useful and actionable. There's nothing more important than first-party data. We currently don't have online ordering enabled. We're working on that. We're rolling that out later this year. So having the ability to first use the app to understand what purchase behavior looks like, and then knowing that we're going to be able to add online ordering later this year, again, it just gives us even more data to use in an impactful fashion. One of the things that I mentioned about our different tiers of guests and how frequently they come to the stores, that's another key piece that the app is able to tell us. One of our mantras is don't focus on the value of an individual transaction. You have to focus on the guest in total and the lifetime value of the guest. So the guests who I mentioned, who are probably venue employees, they're spending less per transaction than is our system-wide average by a decent amount. But then you turn around and you look at what their annual purchase behavior is, and you say, wow, that is really meaningful. If I could get 10,000 more of those, 15,000 more of those, we're making a real impact on our comp sales numbers.
So quick audience participation. How many people have a loyalty app on their phone right now? More than 3 loyalty apps on your phone? More than 5 loyalty apps on your phone? How many of you know what you need to do in those loyalty apps to get your free product, or what triggers what you're getting by using that loyalty app? For all of them? Half? Starting at Wilter. How many of you know what data you're giving up in exchange for those free stars and free pretzel nuggets and lemonade? A little bit more in the industry probably have a better idea of it. I think that's really important to think about. And we think about, you heard it in the Duncan speech, which was, you can't explain things to them. You just need to give them what they want when they want it and be there for them. And if you're being loyal to your consumers, can you talk a little bit about what that does within the loyalty app, and maybe how that's changing the types of rewards and the types of ways you're rewarding different people when you understand who it is a little bit better?
Yeah, it's a conversation that we actually just had last week, where there was a point of view that it would be good and important for us to broaden the rewards that we were offering. So our app, the way that it currently functions is you get X number of points, you can redeem that for a free pretzel product, any pretzel product. And the idea was, hey, well, what if we had tiered rewards offerings? So, fewer points, you can get a free dip. A few more points, maybe that's a free beverage. And up to, hey, you can collect all kinds of points and redeem that for a bucket of nuggets. What we keep coming back to is if you have to explain something like that, it's going to be so cumbersome and so complex. And that's why, the premise of Erin's question a second ago is most people, when we do the research, and this is what we hear, they say, I really like the app because I get something for free every once in a while. And when you say, do you know exactly when you get something for free? What do you have to do and how many times do you have to do it before you get that? And usually the answer is, I'm not sure. Oftentimes the answer is, I don't really care. I just know that it makes me feel good, and it gets back to that brand being loyal to me sensibility, where it just makes me feel good about the purchase and makes me feel like this brand values me or this company values me.
So when you think about all the rich information that you're getting, and a little bit of a loaded question as I come from a media agency and build content that connects and is better when we have better information, where do you fit in the organization? Where does your team, social platforms, connecting with consumers, how is that structured in your organization, and is that evolving of where you're connecting with?
Yeah, so we create all the content, and we're using the data to be as relevant and specific as we can about what the offers are, based on what the data is telling us and how we're able to segment the individuals that we're messaging against. Overall, what the creative content is, and then one of the big pieces of evolution is social media also falls under me, and we have a strong social listening component that we're using more and more impactfully to understand how people are truly talking about our brand and what opportunities there might be in terms of new product development. So it's a nice way to sync up with our innovation pipeline, and sometimes to even get an early read on a test. So our R&D folks have a great idea for a new product. Well, we can even just tap into social and understand, is there any buzz about that? Is anyone talking about this? What's the relevance factor immediately? Does somebody else already dominate that conversation and it's going to make it harder for us to introduce a product? Or is there some white space? Are there some gaps where people are saying, hey, I really wish that Auntie Anne's offered breakfast as a for instance. Guess what? We heard that. And now we're offering breakfast at certain locations and thinking about rolling it out more broadly.
So with that, you're a franchise model, and there's a lot of local stores. What role does the national brand play to the local brand and information the local franchise owners are getting versus rolling up to a national level? How does that work from, one, a sharing of information, and two, a creating of messaging and the loyalty app and things like that?
Yeah, it's more of a push-down model for us, where the individual franchisees, it's incumbent upon them certainly to spend a portion of their revenue on local marketing efforts, and it's incumbent upon corporate to teach them how to do that as efficiently and effectively as possible, and to provide them with core tools and show them how to do it at a broad perspective. So we create local marketing materials for the individual franchisees, and they have to use those for the individual efforts that they're doing, and then we can support them at the local level. It's an interesting instance where stores get a little bit confused in terms of Facebook as a for instance, where they understand that from a national perspective the corporate entity is doing all kinds of programs, and then they're not always sure how their individual store's voice is going to come forward in social media. So we're helping them understand that. We're helping them understand how to be very geo-specific and how to be very relevant for their store. It's one of the other things, again, when we talk about using data and how we're approaching marketing overall. Paid social is a really important tool for us because it gives us that really efficient, relevant scale, in a very geo-specific fashion. So we've shifted, over the past couple of years. Once upon a time, the budget was really just national coverage. Now we've allocated a much larger portion of our budget to targeting within 3/4 of a mile of any of our locations. A lot of it just gets back to a better understanding and using data to see who is coming to our stores and what does that journey look like. I wish that this wasn't the case, but has anyone ever said the following sentence? I'm in the mood for Auntie Anne's, let's go to the mall. It's, at best, let's go to the mall. Oh, why don't we get Auntie Anne's while we're there? But probably you have a mission, you have an experience that's planned, and then while you're at that experience or having that experience, Auntie Anne's can make it better. So we're doing everything that we can to be visible and raise top of mind awareness and irresistibility when you are able to actually go buy a pretzel and some lemonade at that moment. Hitting you right now and saying, "Hey, Auntie Anne's is great," it's not gonna convert.
So with that, there's another consumer behavior that's changing right now, and I think I'm a little safe to say it. Anyone in my company that will be yelling at me for saying this is down the street dealing with some upfronts right now, is behavior and how they react to ads. Exactly that, in terms of hear a lot of brands trying to break through in the streaming platforms, the ad-free platforms, the banner blockers, and the skipping and the muting, and that type of behavior where something like someone willing to download a loyalty app and give you more information, or the technology available by a lot of the partners in this room to be that spontaneous last step to trigger you to walk down to the counter. How important is it to you from a consumer message standpoint, and how, you talked a little bit about the geofencing and beacons and targeting, push messaging and alternatives to mass ads or mass ads better precision targeting. How does that play into what you're hearing from consumers and what you're seeing from consumers?
Yeah, first I'd say one of the slides that Keith put up and his point about brand love. So I've worked at other companies, other brands, other businesses in the past. The consumer love that people feel for Auntie Anne's is different from anywhere else I've ever been. People don't like Auntie Anne's, they love it. And the good news is that helps us, people are more forgiving. We can do more. We're a little bit more engaging because of that just built-in love. So that's something that's really important. Now that said, the ability to tailor our messaging and break through, so I guess I'll say it this way. Email is still disruptive. It's still really important. Having the ability to tap somebody right on their phone through the app, that's critically important if we can be relevant, be appropriate for them, if we can keep them from deleting the app. And I look at all of these things not as either or propositions, but it's really important to make sure that they're all working together hand in hand, and you're hitting as many touch points as possible to be as disruptive as you can. I don't know when somebody's going to check their email. I don't know, as I mentioned, if they've still got the app on their phone or if they decided that they're just going to delete it because it either wasn't doing what they wanted it to. They thought it was going to enable online ordering and it didn't, or they just haven't been to the store in a few months. So hitting them in display in a very geo-specific fashion, hitting them in email in a regular, relevant fashion, and just giving that message of, we get it, we know what you want, we've got something for you because we're loyal to you. And the app, it's all working together.
So outside of that, I imagine being relevant and being there when they need you, social listening and listening to conversations that are happening is probably pretty important as well. I joke sometimes that I'm on a content team, and there's no worse word in this industry than content, because it means so many things. Second to that is influencers and what they mean for brands and how you can use them and how you can connect with them. Talk a little bit about social listening and how you leverage when conversations about your brands or your products and your brand is going on, and how are you tapping into those moments?
Yeah, social listening is something that is happier at Auntie Anne's, I think, than a lot of places. We have a 99% favorable rating in our conversations and mentions across the board. So the bulk of what we're seeing in social is really positive. And really, one of the key things that we do, I mean, influencer activation is a really important priority for us. And the way that we're approaching it is trying to find the right individuals who are talking about us proactively. They've just gone ahead and mentioned that they love Auntie Anne's for whatever reason. Put up a picture of their pretzel or themselves, while they're buying an Auntie Anne's product. We're trying to discern who the right individuals are with sizable enough networks, and then we're just connecting with them directly. And you would be amazed what people will do for an Auntie Anne's t-shirt and a couple of free pretzel cards. Approaching it that way and just generating these one-to-one, anti-insider relationships has generated a really nice return in terms of buzz, in terms of content that those individuals create, in terms of, people see, oh, somebody who I follow, I see that you gave them the t-shirt and the freebies. How do I get that? And then they start a whole conversation. So at its core, we're looking at things a little bit more granularly than a lot of people have been thinking about, I think, influencer marketing. We're not looking at the Kardashians. Frankly, we don't have the budget for things like that. So we're really trying to think about, again, this relevance and this authenticity. Who's already saying that they love us? Well, if they've got a sizable enough network, and that can be 10,000 in their network, we're seeing what we can do to just hype them and continue the outreach. Additionally, we've got some tentpole events, the March Madness that I mentioned before, Oktoberfest, pretzels and beer, sounds good, right? Is an important one for us. So that's another instance where we might look for influencers who could specifically address a topic a little more relevantly. And it's really the same idea. It's, hey, we want to send you a couple $100 worth of pretzels so that you can throw a party, and hopefully you're going to talk about it, and your friends are all going to talk about it.
I think we're going to, I'll ask one last question to Josh, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for more participation and questions from you. If you had to predict, you already said your crystal ball is not perfect. If you, knowing that, had to predict the next 1,000 days out, 5 years out, where do you think it's going? From consumers having access to you and how brands are responding? Yeah,
my crystal ball does not work well, that's true, but I think in this instance, Amazon sort of ruined it for everybody, right? So the Amazonification of society, I want it, I buy it, it's here. It's just the expectation. So what do I see? I see even more importance on enabling as much convenience as possible for our guests, in being as loyal as possible to our guests, meaning going to them. So making it super easy for them to order pretzels in advance so that they can just swing by as they're walking out of the mall, grab the bag, don't even break stride. Doing as much as we can to create great 3PD, third-party delivery experiences, because that's a tricky one. We did an exercise recently where everybody on my team ordered from a different third-party delivery company. Just wanted to see how things came and how long it took and what the experience was. If you guys haven't done that, I would highly recommend it. It's a very interesting exercise to see how many orders get canceled for no reason at all, how many orders come incomplete or incorrect. But what I'm getting at is, this is something that's out of our control in a lot of ways, but we need to do everything we can to make the experience for our guests possible, and as positive as we possibly can. And then the final piece is it ties with third-party delivery. It's the off-premise piece. It's where things are growing. So, we did some research earlier this year, and for the folks who are huge fans of Auntie Anne's, the idea of having a party tray at their office, in their house, it was a revelation. It blew. I was having a conversation with somebody it was right before the Super Bowl, and suggested, what he would think if he had Auntie Anne's pretzel nuggets at his Super Bowl party that weekend. He didn't even understand what I was talking about. It was incredible to see the opportunity right there for, an individual who goes to Auntie Anne's a couple times a month, didn't even give it a thought. It's a huge opportunity for us, and it's driving a good bit of our growth.
Any questions? If not, I'll just start talking Game of Thrones spoilers.
Yeah, I've got one. Can you talk about the focus on the guest and not the transaction? How do you measure, if it's at least at retail, now not delivering home, but how can you measure the transaction versus the engagement? And it's like someone engages for a long time, the sale might go down for transaction at that moment, but the engagement may have a long-lasting relationship.
Well, that's where we're looking at the lifetime value of that individual. So NSPT, net sales per transaction, is always going to be a key metric that we're going to track against. But then through the app, when we can understand, and soon when we have online ordering enabled, when we can see, okay, well, this individual typically, their transactional value is 10% less than our system-wide average, but their total value to us is 75%, 200% more than average. One of the other things that's also interesting that the data tells us is typically our third-party delivery transactions are about double what a normal in-store transaction is. Not a huge surprise. You're not going to invest in the delivery component just for a single pretzel.
Other questions?
All right.
Okay, Josh and Erin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.